people immediately think it's a sexual thing, and it's really not. Like if you read the foreword, where it comes from is literally like navigating with a male cat who, unless you really take control and become the alpha pussy, he will, wreak havoc on your life. That's where the term came from. And then I just applied that to humans, men in particular, when I needed to avoid situations or navigate through toxic waters, so to speak. So alpha pussy. I just sounds strong. I sometimes don't look at myself as a writer as much as I am a storyteller. And I was just telling stories the way I remember them, as I do in Alphapussy. It's like certain stories kept bubbling up, and I'm like, why is this story here? And I would just write it down almost as if it were like an act of imagination, like a sense memory. I would see it and I just write it down as like the way I would tell a story, like this is what happened. And then thematically, that started revealing itself. I'm like, oh, I see what this book is. And then I just took out certain stories and other stories started emerging. Definitely not an outliner. I don't even like to think. I just like to write. Um, it honestly, it started out as a totally different book, which I wasn't going to write. My book agent at the time, I went out one night with him. We got drunk and I started telling him stories about showgirls that I don't really talk about. And the next day he's like, you're literally sitting on a book. You're sitting on this huge book and I'm like, I don't want to write that book though. He's like, but why not? I said, because I'm not like a tell-all sort of gal. Maybe I would put it in some sort of other story. Because I literally could write a book about that whole experience. And then COVID happened. And then he just kept saying, just send me a story. He was going through whatever he was going through. And he said, I just need to laugh. We just like write some stories out. I said, sure. So I'd write, they were like little essays almost. And I would just like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, oh my God, write another one, write another one. Next thing I know, he's like, okay, I'm taking this book out and this is what it is. And right before he was going to take it out, I was like, I don't want to write that book. Like, it's not me. And it was definitely more showgirl centric, Um, I don't know why. It just didn't feel right to me. It's not my personality. Um, and he said, well, just write other stories. And then I started writing other stories that I know I've talked about, like the Prince story or this or that, just literally stories that okay, I'm just going to write them down as an exercise. And then, because at some point I'm going to forget about them, I think. Um, and then, I'd put it away. And then, I was going through a weird time with my mom because she was not well. And, and I think because of that, like I was reflecting on a lot of different things. And then stories kept creeping into my consciousness. I'm like, whoa, I haven't thought about that. Why am I thinking about that? And I would just see the whole story again and I'd write it down. And then the themes started emerging. Like I started noticing a pattern of situations where I had to manipulate my way out of, or a lot of the Valley stuff I'd forgotten about. And then it started really coming up. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of gnarly. Um, and then the Alpha Pussy story showed up, when I got Showgirls, and then that whole thing with the cat came about and like how to navigate. And when I thought about Alpha Pussy, this is a word I've always used because I'm like, I'm going to Alpha Pussy the shit out of this thing. And people would always be, what is that? And I thought it was just a good word. It's like, stand on your own 2 feet. You got to empower yourself. Don't let someone push you around. That's what it meant, because that's how I dealt with my cat. And then I realized you could do that with humans as well. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's what this book is. So it kind of came organically. And then I think then I just started writing and I had so much of the Valley. I think at some point, Johnny, my publisher, he was just like, are you trying to write like I was a memoir of being a teenage girl in the Valley? I said, I always had that in my head. But then I don't know. Then I just thought that's just part one, and that part one leads to part two, and then part two leads to part three. Because there's also like a theme I noticed when, in the world we're living in, and young girls would be like telling me these stories about how they felt uncomfortable, and with a guru or someone was making them feel uncomfortable. I said, dude, you got to like look the guy in the eye and say, hey, you're making me feel uncomfortable. Oh, no, no, I can't do that. There's a whole generation a couple generations that they don't confront things and they're uncomfortable. They haven't been taught how to do that. Where, when I grew up, like, it was like every man for himself. You have to kind of deal with stuff. And I would tell them stories that are like, oh my God, you got to write this. And I really wanted to say, hey, you've got to be responsible for your own self. No one knows you like you. A, don't get in that situation if you're uncomfortable. B, get out of that situation if you're uncomfortable. And C, learn how to to deal with an unpleasant thing because only you as a person knows what's right for you. I'm not here to tell anyone how to live their lives. I don't know. What's right for me is not right for you, and vice versa. So these are just my particular stories. And if it helps people inspire them to do something, great. Or if they just laugh and they enjoy the stories, great. Laurie Anderson, who, of course, the great Laurie Anderson, who's a great friend of mine and very inspiring to me. And I remember saying when I was writing something like, why am I writing this? Like that, why? Like really, who cares? And in her very Laurie way, she was like, nobody cares. She goes, you're writing it for you to, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's good. And then it just kind of flourished and then I saw shape and then I just kind of stuck with it.